CEO's paralyzed daughter sat alone at her graduation until a single dad walked over. Before we continue, tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. The grand auditorium of Riverside University buzzed with excitement as hundreds of graduates filed across the stage. Families cheered, cameras clicked, and the air was thick with celebration and achievement. But in a quiet corner near the large window, 22-year-old Alexandra Sinclair sat motionless in her wheelchair, her graduation cap slightly askew, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her long blonde hair fell like a curtain around her face as she stared out the window with vacant eyes. While joy erupted around her, Alexandra seemed trapped in her own world of silence.
"Dad, why is that lady sitting all by herself?" 8-year-old Tommy tugged on his father's work-worn hand, his untamed brown hair sticking up in every direction as he pointed toward the isolated graduate. Marcus wiped his palms on his faded jeans and followed his son's gaze. The young woman looked so alone it made his chest ache. Her graduation program was crumpled in her lap as if she'd been gripping it too tightly. "Maybe her family got lost in the crowd, buddy?" Marcus whispered, though something deep in his gut told him it was more complicated than that. Tommy pulled harder on his father's hand, his 8-year-old heart unable to ignore suffering when he saw it. "Can we go say hi? She looks really sad." Marcus hesitated. They were here to celebrate his friend Roberto's graduation, and he'd learned to be cautious about approaching strangers. But the woman's isolation reminded him of his own lonely moments, the times when he'd wished someone would notice his pain. "Okay, but just to say congratulations. If she wants privacy, we respect that." As they approached, Marcus could see the young woman's name tag, Alexandra Sinclair, summa cum laude, Business Administration. Her green eyes were rimmed with unshed tears, and he could tell she'd been crying. Tommy, with the fearless compassion that only children possess, broke the silence first. "Hi, I'm Tommy, and this is my dad, Marcus. We saw you sitting alone and wanted to say congratulations on your graduation."
Alexandra looked up, startled. For a moment, she seemed uncertain how to respond, as if kindness from strangers was unfamiliar territory. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice barely audible above the lobby chatter. Marcus knelt down to Tommy's level, then looked up at Alexandra. "I hope we're not intruding. My son has a gift for noticing when people might need a friend." Something shifted in Alexandra's expression. Surprise mixed with cautious hope. "No, it's fine. Thank you for stopping." Tommy, oblivious to the emotional undertones, continued chattering with his typical directness. "My dad says graduation is super important. Are you smart? You must be really smart to graduate from this big school." "Tommy," Marcus warned gently, but Alexandra surprised them both by letting out a small laugh, the first hint of warmth they'd seen from her. "I suppose I must be somewhat smart. I just finished my degree while dealing with some challenges." Her hand unconsciously moved to the armrest of her wheelchair. Marcus noticed the slight tremor in her voice and the way she avoided eye contact. There was pain here that ran deeper than what was visible on the surface. "We were here to see my friend Roberto graduate," Marcus offered, trying to keep the conversation light. "My son was more excited than Roberto himself." "It's my first time at a graduation," Tommy announced proudly. "My dad says when I grow up, I can come to school here too. Do you think they'll remember me?" Alexandra's expression softened as she looked at Tommy's eager face. "I think anyone who meets you would remember you," and Marcus caught a glimpse of genuine warmth beneath her guarded exterior. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the celebration around them. Marcus couldn't help but notice that no one had approached Alexandra during their conversation. No family members looking for her, no friends stopping by for photos. "Are you waiting for someone?" Tommy asked with characteristic directness. Alexandra's composure faltered slightly. "No, my father is at a conference overseas. He couldn't make it." The words hung in the air, and Marcus felt a familiar ache in his chest, the loneliness of celebrating life's moments without the people who matter most. As a single father, he knew that feeling intimately. There had been countless school events, bedtime stories, and scraped-knee moments where he'd wished Tommy had more than just him, where he'd wished Clara could be there to share the load, to witness their son's growth. But seeing Alexandra's isolation made him realize something profound. At least he and Tommy had each other. This young woman had achieved something incredible and had absolutely no one to share it with. "Well then," Marcus said, making a decision that surprised even himself, "would you like us to take a photo of you? Every graduate should have a picture to remember this day." Alexandra blinked, clearly taken aback by the offer. "Oh, you don't have to. Dad's really good at taking pictures. He takes lots of me because Mom can't." The innocent statement hung in the air. Tommy had never known his mother. Clara had died from complications during his birth 8 years ago. But the boy spoke of her absence matter-of-factly, without the weight of grief that still pressed on Marcus's chest daily. Marcus saw understanding flicker in Alexandra's eyes. I would actually really like that," she said softly. Marcus pulled out his old smartphone and spent several minutes finding the best angle and lighting. Alexandra straightened in her wheelchair, adjusting her graduation cap and managing a genuine smile for the first time since they'd approached her. After taking several photos, Marcus showed her the results. "These turned out great. Would you like me to send them to you somehow?" As Alexandra gave him her phone number, Tommy noticed her graduation program with its list of academic achievements. "What's all this writing mean?" he asked, pointing to the honors. "It means she was one of the very best students in her whole school," Marcus explained, reading over the accolades. "Alexandra, this is incredible. Summa cum laude. You should be really proud." For a moment, Alexandra's carefully maintained composure cracked completely. "I am," she whispered, and Marcus could hear years of struggle and determination in those 2 words. Tommy, sensing the emotional moment, did what came naturally to him. He hugged her. Without asking permission or considering social boundaries, he wrapped his small arms around her shoulders. "You're really cool," he announced matter-of-factly, "and you're really brave, too." Alexandra closed her eyes and returned the hug, and Marcus saw tears finally spill over. Not tears of sadness this time, but something more complex: gratitude, surprise, and perhaps relief at being truly seen by another person. When Tommy stepped back, Alexandra wiped her eyes and smiled more broadly than she had all day. "Thank you, Tommy. You're pretty cool yourself." As other families began filtering out of the building, Marcus realized they should probably head home. The drive back to their small apartment was long, and Tommy would need dinner soon. But something about leaving Alexandra alone again felt fundamentally wrong. "Listen," he said carefully, "I know we just met, and please don't feel obligated. But would you like to get some ice cream? There's a place not far from here." Alexandra hesitated, and Marcus could see her internal debate. He recognized the look of someone who had grown accustomed to isolation, who found it safer to stay guarded than risk disappointment. "Please," Tommy added, his eyes bright with hope. "Dad never gets ice cream because he says it's too expensive, but today's special." Marcus felt his cheeks burn at embarrassment at his son's honesty, but Alexandra's response surprised him. "In that case, I'd love to. And ice cream is my treat. It's the least I can do for the 2 people who made my graduation day memorable." Have you ever noticed how the smallest acts of kindness can completely change someone's day? Sometimes all it takes is someone willing to see past the surface and recognize the human being underneath. The ice cream shop was a small, family-owned place with mismatched chairs and faded photos on the walls. Alexandra seemed more relaxed, away from the formal university setting, and Marcus found himself genuinely enjoying her company. She was intelligent and thoughtful, with a dry humor that emerged once she felt more comfortable. When Tommy asked her about her favorite color, she gave it serious consideration before answering, "Forest green, because it reminds me that even in the darkest places, life finds a way to grow." "So, "What made you choose business?" Marcus asked, as Tommy focused intently on his chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream. "I want to understand how companies work, how they make decisions, how they treat people. I think there's a lot of room for improvement in how businesses operate, especially when it comes to inclusion and accessibility." He heard the passion in her voice and suspected her academic choice was deeply personal. "That sounds like it could make a real difference in people's lives."
I hope so. I want to believe that people in positions of power can learn to see beyond surface assumptions. She glanced at her wheelchair, then back at Marcus. There's so much more to any person than what's immediately visible. Dad always says people are like books, Tommy chimed in, ice cream coating his upper lip. You can't know what the story is just by looking at the cover. Both adults smiled at the boy's wisdom, and Marcus felt a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the sunshine streaming through the shop's windows. As they talked, Marcus began to piece together fragments of Alexandra's story. She mentioned living alone, her father's frequent business trips, the challenges of navigating campus in a wheelchair, but she spoke carefully, revealing just enough to maintain the conversation without exposing too much vulnerability. Marcus found himself sharing more than he usually did with strangers. He told her about his job at the manufacturing plant, Tommy's latest adventures in second grade, the simple rhythms of their life together. "It must be challenging, raising him alone," Alexandra said gently. Marcus was quiet for a moment, stirring his melted vanilla ice cream. "Some days are harder than others," he admitted. "I dropped out of high school when my dad left, had to help support my mom and siblings. Met Tommy's mother at the factory where we both worked. We had all these plans." His voice trailed off, but Alexandra didn't push. She simply waited, giving him space to share what he felt comfortable sharing. "Clara died when Tommy was born, complications during delivery. So it's been just the two of us since day one." "I'm so sorry," Alexandra said, and Marcus could tell she meant it. "The thing is," Marcus continued, looking at Tommy, who was now examining the sprinkles on his ice cream with scientific interest, "I spent so long thinking we were incomplete, like we were missing this essential piece that made other families whole." He paused, then looked directly at Alexandra. But watching him today, seeing how naturally he reaches out to people, how much joy he finds in celebrating others, I'm starting to think maybe we've been whole all along.
They spent over an hour at the ice cream shop, and Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so at ease talking with another adult. Alexandra had a way of listening that made him feel heard, not judged. When she laughed at Tommy's stories about his teacher's pet hamster, Marcus noticed how her whole face transformed. The sadness that had surrounded her at the graduation ceremony seemed to lift, replaced by something lighter and more hopeful. As they prepared to leave, Alexandra turned to Marcus with an expression that seemed almost vulnerable. "Thank you," she said, "both of you. I was dreading today, and you turned it into something I'll actually want to remember." "Why were you dreading it?" Tommy asked, his head tilted with curiosity. Alexandra looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. "Sometimes when good things happen, it can feel sad if you don't have family there to share them with," she explained gently. Tommy considered this seriously, his 8-year-old mind processing the complexity of adult emotions. "But we were there, and now we're like family friends, right, Dad?" Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Right, buddy." Alexandra's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were definitely tears of joy. "I would really like that," she said softly. As they prepared to part ways, Marcus realized that something fundamental had shifted in his understanding of connection and family. Sometimes the most important relationships in our lives begin with the most unexpected encounters. Over the following weeks, an unlikely friendship began to blossom through text messages and phone calls. Alexandra started sharing photos of her daily life, her apartment near campus, funny things she encountered while job searching, articles about business ethics that sparked her interest. Marcus reciprocated with pictures of Tommy's school projects and stories from the manufacturing plant.
Through these conversations, Marcus began to understand the true scope of Alexandra's isolation. Her mother had died shortly after giving birth to her, and her father, Nathan Sinclair, was the CEO of a major consulting firm who traveled constantly for work. Alexandra had been raised by a succession of nannies and housekeepers, attending elite private schools where her wheelchair made her stand out in ways she never wanted. "I became really good at being invisible," she told Marcus during one of their evening phone calls. "It was easier than dealing with the stares and whispered conversations." "What changed?" "The accident," Alexandra said quietly. "Hard to be invisible when you're the girl who crashed into a tree while skiing with her sorority sisters."
The accident had happened during her sophomore year of college. What should have been a fun weekend trip had ended with a collision that shattered her spine and changed everything about how she moved through the world. My father flew back from Hong Kong for exactly 36 hours, long enough to make sure I had the best medical care money could buy, and then he was gone again. I think my disability represented a problem he couldn't solve with a business strategy or delegation. Marcus felt anger rise in his chest on her behalf, but he kept his voice gentle. That must have been incredibly lonely. It was, but you know what's strange? In some ways, the accident forced me to become stronger. I couldn't rely on being invisible anymore. I had to learn to advocate for myself, to demand to be seen and heard. Is that why you chose business school? Partly. I wanted to understand how people in power make decisions that affect others. I wanted to be in a position to influence those decisions someday. For her part, Alexandra learned that Marcus had dropped out of high school at 17 when his father abandoned the family, leaving him to help support his mother and younger siblings. He'd met Clara at the factory where they both worked third shift, and they'd fallen in love over shared dreams of something better. We were going to save enough money for me to get my GED, maybe go to trade school. Clara wanted to become a nurse. We had it all planned out. Those dreams had been put on hold when Clara became pregnant, and they'd been shattered entirely when complications during Tommy's birth took her life. "The doctor said there was nothing anyone could have done differently," Marcus explained. "But for the longest time, I felt like I'd failed her. Like if I'd been able to provide better health care or if we'd had more money. Marcus, you can't blame yourself for that." "I know that now, mostly, but it's taken 3 years to really believe it." Since Clara's death, Marcus had focused entirely on providing for Tommy and being the kind of present, loving father he'd never had himself. "You're raising an amazing kid," Alexandra told him. "Tommy has this incredible capacity for empathy and joy. That doesn't happen by accident." "I'm trying," Marcus replied. "Some days I feel like I'm failing him, like he deserves more than I can give." "He deserves love and attention, and someone who sees him for who he is," Alexandra said firmly. "From what I can see, he has all of that and more." Their conversations often stretched late into the evening, long after Tommy had gone to bed. They talked about everything: childhood memories, favorite books, fears about the future, dreams they'd given up, and new ones they were beginning to imagine. One evening, about a month after they'd met, Marcus's ancient car finally gave up completely. He called Alexandra, frustrated and worried about how he'd get Tommy to school and himself to work. "I can help you research used cars," Alexandra offered. "I know it's not much, but I can at least help you figure out what's reliable in your price range." She spent hours that night searching online listings, reading reviews, and creating a spreadsheet of options for Marcus to consider. When she sent it to him the next morning, Marcus stared at his phone in amazement. No one had ever put that kind of effort into helping him solve a problem, not since Clara died. "Why did you do all this?" he asked her during their call that evening. "Because you needed help, and I could provide it. Isn't that what friends do?" Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a recognition that he had been carrying his burdens alone for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone share the load. When Alexandra struggled with job interviews, where potential employers seemed to focus more on her wheelchair than her qualifications, Marcus became her source of encouragement and perspective. "Tell me again why you want this particular job," he said during one of their conversations after she'd had a particularly discouraging interview. "Because I want to help companies create more inclusive workplace cultures," Alexandra replied, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. "No, tell me why you really want it. Not the professional answer, the personal one." Alexandra was quiet for a long moment. "Because I want other people like me to walk into offices and not have to prove they belong there. I want kids in wheelchairs to see people like them in positions of leadership. I want to be part of changing how the business world thinks about disability and capability." "There it is," Marcus said softly. "That passion, that vision, that's what they need to see. Not your wheelchair, not your limitations, your fire." "How do you always know exactly what to say?" "Because I see you, Alexandra, the real you, and what I see is someone who's going to change the world, one boardroom at a time." Those conversations sustained Alexandra through weeks of rejections and disappointing interviews. Marcus's belief in her became an anchor when her own confidence wavered. Tommy, meanwhile, had adopted Alexandra as an honorary family member without any of the adults' complications or hesitations. He drew her pictures, insisted on video calls to show her his latest Lego creations, and frequently asked when they could see her again. It was Tommy who suggested that Alexandra join them for his school's father-son picnic when she mentioned feeling particularly lonely on a difficult weekend. "She can be like my aunt," Tommy announced during breakfast one Saturday morning. "Dad, you always say families are made of people who love each other, not just people who are related."
Marcus felt his heart swell with pride at his son's capacity for inclusion, but he worried about putting Alexandra in an awkward position. "Tommy, that's really sweet, but I'm not sure, actually..." Alexandra interrupted when Marcus called to explain Tommy's invitation. "I would love that, if you're sure it wouldn't be weird for you." "Weird?" Marcus laughed. "Alexandra, you've become one of the most important people in our lives. Of course it wouldn't be weird." The father-son picnic was held at Riverside Park on a perfect Saturday afternoon in late spring. Tommy proudly introduced Alexandra to his classmates and teachers as "my friend Alexandra, who's really smart and graduated from the big school." Marcus watched her light up as she engaged with the other children, answering their curious questions about her wheelchair with patience and humor. "Does it hurt to be in a wheelchair?" one little girl asked with the directness that only children possess. "Sometimes," answered Alexandra honestly. "But you know what? Everyone has things about their body that are challenging sometimes. Some people wear glasses to see better, some people need hearing aids, some people use wheelchairs to get around. We all have different ways of moving through the world." "Can I try sitting in it?" another child asked. "Sure, but only if your parents say it's okay." And soon she had a line of second graders taking turns experiencing the world from her perspective.
Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion as he watched her natural ease with the children. She would make an incredible mother someday. He thought, then caught himself wondering where that thought had come from. It was during a quiet moment, as they sat on a blanket watching Tommy play with the other kids, that Marcus realized how profoundly his perspective on life had shifted since meeting Alexandra. "You know," he said carefully, "I've spent the last 3 years thinking that Tommy and I were incomplete, like we were missing a piece that made other families whole." Alexandra turned to look at him, her green eyes attentive and warm in the afternoon sunlight. But watching him today, seeing how happy and confident he is, how naturally he includes others, I think maybe we've been whole all along. Maybe we just needed to find the right people to share our wholeness with. Alexandra's eyes filled with tears, and she reached over to take his hand. "Marcus, I've spent most of my life feeling like I was too much trouble for people to deal with, too complicated, too different. But you and Tommy,
You've never made me feel like I was anything other than exactly who I'm supposed to be." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Tommy demonstrate his cartwheel technique to a group of impressed classmates. The sun was warm on their faces, and Marcus felt a peace he hadn't experienced in years. "What if," he said eventually, "we stopped thinking about what our families are missing and started focusing on what we could build together?" Alexandra squeezed his hand tighter. "I'd like that more than you know." As the afternoon wound down and they packed up their picnic supplies, Marcus realized that somewhere between that first graduation day and now, his feelings for Alexandra had evolved far beyond friendship. He was falling in love with her strength, her intelligence, her capacity for kindness, her way of seeing the world. But more than that, he was falling in love with the family they were becoming together, the way Tommy lit up around her, the way she brought out the best in both of them. But loving someone and being able to build a life with them were two different things, and Marcus knew their different backgrounds presented real challenges. Do you believe that love can grow between two people who seem to come from completely different worlds? Sometimes the heart doesn't care about logic or social expectations, it just knows what feels right. 6 months after their first meeting, Marcus got the call that would change everything. He was at work when his phone buzzed with Alexandra's number. She rarely called during the day, respecting his work schedule, so he knew it must be important. "Marcus, I got it," she said, her voice bubbling with excitement. "The job I've been hoping for, they offered it to me." "Alexandra, that's incredible. Tell me everything." She explained that a major consulting firm had been impressed by her innovative thesis on inclusive business practices. They wanted her to head up a new diversity and accessibility initiative, exactly the kind of work she'd been dreaming of doing. "It's everything I've been working toward," she said. "The salary is more than I ever imagined, and I'd have a real budget to implement change. I could actually make a difference." "I'm so proud of you," Marcus said, and he meant it completely. "You've worked so hard for this." There was a pause on the line, and Marcus sensed there was more to the story. "There's just one thing," Alexandra said, and he could hear the nervousness creeping into her voice. "The position is based in Colorado. I'd have to relocate." Marcus felt his heart sink, but he forced enthusiasm into his voice. His own feelings couldn't matter when Alexandra had achieved something this significant. That's a great opportunity. You have to take it." "Do I?" Alexandra asked quietly. "Marcus, these past months with you and Tommy, it's been the happiest I've ever been. I don't know if any job is worth giving that up." Marcus set down the tool he'd been holding and found a quiet corner where they could talk privately. "Alexandra, you can't turn down your dream job for us. You've worked too hard. What if it's not my dream job anymore? What if my dreams have changed?" The question hung between them, loaded with everything they'd been feeling but hadn't said out loud. "What are you saying?" Marcus asked, hardly daring to hope. "I'm saying I love you, Marcus, both of you. And if there's any chance of building something real together, I'd rather take that risk than move across the country for a job that might just leave me successful and alone." The conversation that followed was one of the most honest either of them had ever had. They talked about their feelings, their fears, and their hopes for the future. Marcus admitted that he had fallen in love with her somewhere between that first graduation day and now, but had been afraid to say anything because of their different backgrounds and circumstances. "I'm a high school dropout who works in a factory. You're brilliant and educated and destined for amazing things. I didn't think I had any right to ask you to consider a life with someone like me." "Someone like you?" Alexandra's voice was incredulous. "Marcus, you're one of the most intelligent, caring, principled people I've ever met. You've raised an incredible child while working multiple jobs and dealing with grief most people can't imagine. You've shown me what it means to be truly valued and accepted. Don't you dare diminish yourself." "But the money, the lifestyle differences. Money doesn't buy the kind of happiness I found with you and Tommy," Alexandra said firmly. "I've had money my whole life, and I've never been as content as I am sitting in your tiny kitchen helping Tommy with homework while you cook dinner." Marcus felt tears he didn't know he'd been holding back start to fall.
"I love you too," he said. "More than I thought I could love anyone again. But I can't ask you to give up everything you've worked for." "You're not asking. I'm choosing. I'm choosing us." "What about the job?" Alexandra was quiet for a moment, and Marcus could practically hear her thinking. "What if I countered their offer, asked if I could work remotely with quarterly travel to Colorado? The work I want to do, changing corporate culture around inclusion, that's something I could do from anywhere. And maybe I'd be more effective doing it from a place where I have the support and love I need to do my best work." That evening, Marcus sat Tommy down for one of the most important conversations of both their lives. "Buddy, you know how Alexandra has become really special to us?" Tommy nodded enthusiastically. "She's like family." "Well, she is family, in all the ways that matter. And I need to tell you something important. I love Alexandra, not just as a friend, but the way I loved Mommy." Tommy considered this seriously, his 8-year-old mind processing this new information. "Does that mean she might come live with us?" asked Marcus. "Would you like that?" "Are you kidding? That would be the best thing ever. She could help me with my homework and teach me about business, and we could all watch movies together." Tommy paused, then added more thoughtfully, "Do you think Mommy would be okay with it?" Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. Even 3 years later, Tommy's intuitive understanding of complex emotions amazed him. "I think Mommy would want us to be happy," Marcus said carefully. "And I think she'd love Alexandra for making us smile so much." "Then yes," Tommy declared with the decisive authority that only children possess. "Let's be a family with Alexandra."
2 weeks later, Alexandra negotiated a remote work arrangement with a consulting firm, with the agreement to spend 1 week per month in Colorado and attend quarterly meetings in person. It wasn't exactly what the company had originally envisioned, but her ideas were innovative enough that they were willing to be flexible. More importantly, it allowed her to build the life she actually wanted, one filled with love and daily connection, and the simple joy of being part of a family that saw her completely and valued her exactly as she was. 1 year later, Marcus stood in the same university auditorium where they'd first met, but this time he was wearing a cap and gown. With Alexandra's encouragement and financial support, he'd enrolled in night classes to complete his GED and then began working toward an associate's degree in manufacturing technology. It hadn't been easy. Balancing work, school, and family time required careful coordination and lots of late-night studying. But Alexandra had been there every step of the way, helping him navigate unfamiliar academic processes and celebrating every small victory. Tommy had become his most enthusiastic cheerleader, proudly telling anyone who would listen that his dad was going to college like Alexandra did. Now, as Marcus's name was called, Tommy jumped up from his seat in the front row and cheered just as loudly as he had for Roberto years earlier. "That's my dad!" he shouted, causing the families around them to smile at his enthusiasm. Alexandra, sitting beside Tommy, wiped away tears of pride and joy. In her lap was the engagement ring Marcus had given her just 2 weeks earlier, a simple band that had belonged to his grandmother, offered with a proposal that was everything she had never known she wanted. "I don't have much to offer you in terms of material things, but I can promise you a life filled with love and laughter and daily adventures with the most amazing kid in the world. Will you marry us?" Her yes had been immediate and tearful and complete. After the ceremony, as they posed for photos as a family, Marcus reflected on the incredible chain of events that had brought them to this moment. A simple act of kindness on a graduation day had blossomed into something none of them could have imagined. Alexandra had found the family acceptance she'd always craved, Tommy had gained a mother figure who celebrated his curiosity and kindness, and Marcus had discovered that love could grow in the most unexpected places. "Dad," said Tommy as they walked back to their car, the reliable used sedan Alexandra had helped them choose, "remember when you said education was important?" "I remember, buddy." "Well, I think kindness is important too, because if we hadn't been kind to Alexandra that day, we wouldn't be a family now." Alexandra reached over and ruffled Tommy's hair, then took Marcus's hand. "Sometimes," she said, "the most important lessons can't be learned in classrooms." As they drove home together to the house they now shared, filled with Tommy's art projects and Alexandra's business books and Marcus's technical manuals, Marcus marveled at how profoundly their lives had changed. What had started as a single father trying to give his son a broader view of the world had become a love story that none of them saw coming. They had all been searching for something without knowing what it was, and they'd found it in each other. Their story had begun with a lonely young woman sitting alone at her graduation, but it had evolved into something much more beautiful, a testament to the power of compassion, the importance of showing up for each other, and the truth that the most extraordinary chapters of our lives often begin with the simplest acts of human kindness. Sometimes what looks like an ending, a graduation, a milestone, a moment of solitude, is actually just the beginning of something wonderful. And sometimes the family you choose is even more precious than the one you're born into, because it's built not on obligation or blood, but on the daily decision to love and support each other through all of life's challenges and celebrations. Marcus had thought he was just teaching his son about kindness that day at the graduation ceremony. He had no idea he was actually writing the first chapter of the rest of their lives. If this story touched your heart, you're not alone. Thousands of people have found love and family in the most unexpected places, simply because someone chose kindness over indifference. Have you ever experienced a moment where a stranger's compassion changed your life? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you believe in the power of human connection to transform lives, make sure to subscribe.